Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. All right, NBA playoffs in full swing. Jason Timpf, host of Hoops Tonight, is joining us. You know, I was watching the T-Wolves and Nuggets, and I thought this would be a very long series. I said 6 or 7, I'll take Denver. But I was watching Charles Barkley after, and his interpretation was sort of mine, which is you watched these guys play. Minnesota's bigger, Minnesota's deeper, and there was clearly an athletic advantage. They're more athletic. I mean, and some of that's Ant, maybe a large part of it's Ant, but Jokic isn't highly what you would call dynamic. He's just a great basketball player. Jamal Murray, again, he never made an all-star team. I wouldn't call him dynamic. He's a shot maker. Michael Porter is. Gordon is just a relentless energy guy. But when I watched that series, and I don't want to overreact, but I was like, oh, they can throw a lot of bodies at Denver. A lot of bodies. They go about 8 deep. You know, there's not much of a Denver bench. And my take is it's hard to win when they're deeper, they're more athletic. And part of this is, and I said this about 2 weeks ago, I said, it's an inflection point for Ant Edwards. Is he going to become Dominique, spectacular, but can't get through these profoundly deep teams, no titles, and we just have great highlights? Or Jordan, that you got to win 2 to 3 or 4, and it's like, no, this is the face of the league. And Wemby and Ant feel like those are the 2 guys that should be the face of the league. So this series, to me, it's a lot bigger than people think. It's not just, well, Ant goes down. It's like Denver may have a bench at some point. You know, like this Denver team, you beat them now, they'll probably have to react to you. Also, if Minnesota loses, they may not keep Karl Anthony Towns. So this Twin Towers thing, although it's worked, it may be more experimental if they got doused in 5 games in this series. So I feel like I'm watching this fascinating inflection point with Ant, as he is now. If they get to the finals, they match up very well with Boston. You're like, is this Jordan's first title? Am I overreacting to it?
No, not at all. I mean, Ant's been the best player in the playoffs so far. He's literally been the best guy.
No question.
He's been the best.
No
he soundly outplayed Nikola Jokic last night. But it's funny when you're watching the games live. There's always like kind of a narrative that tends to take shape, and there was a lot of focus on like, oh, Jamal Murray is struggling. Oh, Naz Reid had a scoring run in the 4th quarter. Like you focus on these specific things. But I went back and looked through the tape. And as I watched, one of the biggest things that stood out to me is Jokic just didn't play very well. He had 7 turnovers. He was completely caught off guard by a lot of like the pressure that Minnesota brought. They were picking him up full court randomly. He had to travel in the backcourt where Naz Reid randomly picked him up in the full court. There, Rudy Gobert was kind of in his head, kind of stunting, faking like he was going to step up, and then he'd get back and deflect that lob pass to Aaron Gordon. Jokic had a bad night. Anthony Edwards came in and just completely cleaned house. And so a lot of times, like I look at it and it's like, if you're expecting Jamal Murray to just break out against the best perimeter defender in the league in Jaden McDaniels, that's probably not going to happen.
That's right.
But Jokic does have the ability to flip the script in the series. He can be much better. And then one of the big things Michael Malone was talking about after the game, he really didn't like their defensive effort in the second half. And generally, I agree. They let Ant get way too comfortable in the mid range when he was isolating those smaller Denver guards. And he's so dead. He's hitting that fadeaway at like 50%. So like you can't leave him there. You have to get out and like kind of crowd him more. And so I think a better defensive effort to do a better job containing Ant. And then Jokic actually inflicting himself on the series as the best player in the world can flip the script. But to your point, it is absolutely an inflection point. Because if Minnesota wins this series and Ant outplays Jokic, then he just beat the defending champs and the best player in the world without home court advantage and without a legitimate co-star. I mean,
and if you look, Jason, the face of the league right now is really Tatum's personality. He really is a giver. He's never a taker. You almost have to push him, nudge him to take. So he looks like, to me, he loves being an all-star, making good money and winning games. He doesn't have any real agenda to be the face of the league. Jokic, most of the European guys are not interested. So, like, it's open for Ant. Wemby's not there yet. Jokic isn't interested. Giannis has never really moved the needle in terms of like ratings. Embiid's not healthy. So as I'm watching him, first half he was insane. And then he was very quiet in the third. But as I'm watching him, I'm like, Jordan had these dead quarters. I mean, Michael was classic for when his head would steam. You're like, okay, Michael's on one. And then Michael really he was like a great baseball pitcher that he knew the 12 pitches he had to get people out. Like Michael knew gear shift. LeBron's gotten very good at that. Like LeBron's always hoping his teammates get the game going. And if they don't, then he steps in. And then at the 7-minute mark, they get him out. But I watched Ant and I'm like, don't be too critical of him. 25 points in an NBA game and a half is a lot of work. That's a lot of energy. And then in the second half, you're like, first of all, dumb tech. Talked about that all day. But my take was kind of like, it's there for the taking. It feels like Denver's not equipped on the bench. They could die to have a 6-man who could play 20 minutes of defense. This may be the moment. All these great stars have moments. It took Jordan years and years. The difference is Jordan had like iconic teams, Pistons, Celtics in front of him. Denver hasn't risen to that. So as good as the West is, Jason, it feels like this is the moment to seize it.
It's absolutely there for the taking. Again, I still think Denver is going to win the series. I certainly think it's way too early to bail on them entirely. An important element to that game too is they spotted Minnesota an 18-4 lead, and Michael Malone talked after the game. Jamal Murray didn't practice all week because of his calf. KCP's got a bad ankle, so like they were easing their way into the series in a lot of ways. Also, generally, just a little brief story. Like I play a lot of pickup basketball, but then during the summer, a lot of the college kids around town and the guys who play overseas, they come home and I work out with them. And there's always like an adjustment for me going from lower level competition to higher level competition. And there's no doubt that Minnesota is a much higher level defense than the Lakers were. And so there's going to be a little bit of like that pass, I need to put a little more on it. I need to be more accurate. I can't be as sloppy with my handle. This shot that I got off against Austin Reeves, I won't be able to get off against Jaden McDaniels. Like all these, there's going to be an adjustment period for Denver in this series to kind of get used to that offense. That said, as far as Ant goes, like it's there's still so much room for him to improve because that quiet third quarter, Ant got tired. You could tell Ant got tired in that game. Yes. So there's going to be an energy management piece that he figures out. There's going to be like a reading the floor better piece that he figures out. There was a little bully ball possession on Reggie Jackson where he just walked. It was the play he got the tech. He walked him right underneath the rim and put it in. It was the easiest bucket he got all night. Like there's going to be a point where he realizes all these guards can't guard him. And he starts destroying people even closer to the rim. And so the sky's the limit for him. I got in trouble with Celtics fans for comparing the two of them. It was a mailbag question. But then I started thinking about it. I'm like, no, this is a real thing here. This is who's the next great American player. Yeah. Because there is something to be said about being the best American player in the NBA from a marketability standpoint, right? Sure. Like there's a reason why a huge portion of my listeners are overseas. It's because the best players in the league are all from overseas. And so they've got these huge fan bases from Serbia and in the Philippines and things like that. There's all these guys that are supporting these players. And we need an American star that can come up and kind of take the mantle. And to your point, like Jayson Tatum he just doesn't quite have the personality for it. But the biggest piece and the main reason why I think Ant is better than him has to do with the athleticism piece.
Oh, yeah.
Ant can have Bradley Beal on the wing and just utterly blow by him off the dribble and then dunk on Kevin Durant like he's not even there. And then it's not to say that Jayson Tatum hasn't had big dunks in his career because he's got great size, but his first step is not nearly as dynamic as Anthony Edwards is. And so when he faces a really good defender in a late game situation, he can struggle to get to his spots sometimes. Ant never struggles getting to his spot. Like he's gonna get a good look up. It's just a question of whether or not he can make it. And to his credit, the two big things that he's figured out that have been his inflection between the Dominique and MJ kind of like a fork in the road, the split for him has been he's been better at reading the floor. He was the guy who got Naz Reid going last night. It was the banked in three. That was a kick out from Ant when his man helped. The driving and one on the baseline, that was a skip pass from Ant when he was reading a pick and roll coverage. And then the second piece of it is that jump shooting piece. He is deadly in that 14 to 18 foot range. And so he has a shot he can go to where it's like, this is going to go in a majority of the time. It gives him like a certain level of resilience in the playoffs. And so I think he's just better. I think he's the best American player
Well,
in the league of that generation, and I think he has a chance to take that mantle.
well, to be the best player, it's like being the best country western star. It's not just your songs are popular and easy to dance to. There's often something it really touches people. If you look at the faces of the league, I don't know if he was a face of a league, but the first player that caught my attention in the 70s was Dr. J. Nobody played like that, right? Nobody played like that, his hand size. And then after that was Magic Johnson. We'd never had a 6'8.5" point guard. And then it was Larry Bird alongside Magic. We'd never had a forward easily be the best shooter and passer in the league. Like he played like a two guard. And then you go into Shaq. Okay, there's nothing been that powerful. Big guys don't run the floor. And then, and before him, it's Michael, the greatest player of all time with great flair. Kobe was never really the face of the league, but was like Michael Light. Then you go into LeBron, arguably the greatest player, the great Swiss Army knife that does everything differently. So all those players were like, to some degree, a little bit of unicorns athletically, or they had a dimension to their game. They still show Dr. J's dunk against Michael Cooper. It's still the greatest dunk in league history. In a game, it's the 70s. It's 50 years ago with all these athletes. So with Ants, I've watched Jayson Tatum live 3 times. I've watched him 100 times. He's very good. It's not historically unique looking. He's just really clever and really smooth, good two-way player. Ant does stuff, and you're like, okay, it's time to put the drink down. Let's, I got to watch the replay on that. Like, even NBA guys are like, whoa. You see him come off the bench. So Wemby has some of that. Wemby could block 8 blocks a game. He could have a stretch. Nobody looks like that. So I do think Ant's advantage is there's a lot of wow stuff. I remember when Shaq came in the league. Jerry Tarkanian, I covered him at UNLV. He told me when Shaq was a sophomore, I was at a place called the late Jerry Tarkanian. I covered him in Vegas at a place called Sharks or Tarks or Sharks. And we were sitting at a bar, me and a guy named John Henderson, a retired sports writer now in Italy. And he said, there's a kid named Shaquille O'Neal at LSU. And he goes, I know you've seen highlights. He's going to be the greatest basketball player you've ever seen when he plays. And, Jerry was a very good recruiter. And, and he just said, there's never been anything like him. And that's kind of the sentence for the faces of the league. There's never been anything like him. And my take is he's a little Dominique, a little Michael. What's his comp? It feels like the right comps.
He's bigger and stronger than the other 2 guards that came before him too. Like he's got a little bit of like the downhill force that you saw from Dwayne Wade, but he's bigger and a better shooter, right? He's got some of the like the footwork stuff from the mid to high post, but again, like he's got like a strength and a power element to his game that even MJ and Kobe didn't have. So like in a weird way, this is the beautiful thing about basketball history is every player. It's very rare to have a guy like Kobe who's like almost the spitting image of the guy he was trying to be like, right? Like Kobe and MJ were so similar. Ant's kind of got his own unique flair on it. It's like Dwayne Wade meets better jump shooting meets the body of a middle linebacker in the NFL. Like it's hard to describe, but like and then again, the big piece of it is like this guy's going to Kevin Durant and he's like, yeah, you're my favorite player, but I'm busting your ass, right? Like it's like this weird like shit talking mixed with respectful, mixed with like incredible aggression, but he's also just got this huge personality. And that to me is a big part of the marketability element where like I could see him being a superstar in the league for decades.